What's going on, everybody? And we are logging on to episode 127 of the podcast. We got a very special episode for you guys today. Another top 5 episode as we're doing our top 5 favorite Broadway shows or musicals, however way you want to look at it. I am your host, Frank McKnight. And today we are joined by a good friend of mine back in middle school and even the summer camp days as well.
I forgot about that. That was a good reminder. I appreciate that.
Dude. But nonetheless, Dan Mattia, how you doing, my man?
I'm very good. How are you, Frank?
I'm good, dude. It's great to see you. You look great. You sound great. All good things coming so far from this podcast.
Likewise. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I always have a good time with these, especially when I have someone on I haven't seen in a while to catch up and everything like that, and then get your opinion on certain media content and shows and whatnot. This is actually a topic I've been meaning to do for a while. The reason why I haven't done it yet until now was because I couldn't think of the right person to ask to do this. Like, I have my usual co-host Luke on there, and I've asked him. I felt the grounds with him as far as Broadway shows. He likes them, but he's not too big with them. He hasn't seen enough of them to even form a top 5 list. You know.
Sure.
I've seen a good amount. In fact, I only seen 5, so the 5 that I saw, okay, I kind of arranged in the order I want.
So they're simultaneously the 5 best and the 5 worst that you've ever seen. You've only seen 5.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, now I know where we stand. Got
it. But how you been, man? Everything all good? How's the summer treating you thus far? Even though it's just the beginning right now.
Yeah,
summer.
No, we had a couple really nice days, and I'm really not one for the heat, so. Now it's starting to creep up a little.
Sure.
But I think we got lucky with the Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. It was nice. Like, nice and cool. Some nice breezes here and there. Absolutely.
Can't complain. So, yeah, no, it is just starting, and I'm not really a summer guy, but it's nice that, you know, you can get out a little bit more. There's a lot more you can do.
Yeah.
So can't complain, you know. It's
How'd you feel about this past winter with, like, no snow at all? Are you a winter guy?
I am. I'd say I'm gravitating more toward being a fall autumn guy now, but I do love winter. I'm December baby, so
same here, man.
Technically, officially fall, but it's winter. December to me, it's a winter month. You can't convince me otherwise.
Yeah,
bit of a bummer that there's no snow. I like one good one because obviously you have to deal with it. When we were kids, you didn't really have to deal with it. You didn't have and we had boundless energy to shovel it if we had to deal with it.
100%.
So it's kind of like a nostalgia thing, but it's also a novelty. Like, we don't live in Minnesota. We don't get snow all the time.
Right.
So a little bit goes a long way. You know, it checks the box.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
So definitely a bummer that we didn't have any this year.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the pendulum shifts and we get, like, dumped on this coming winter.
I think that's what's going to happen, to be honest with you. I think it's well due, per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love the snow personally because of snowboarding. I went like once or twice this past winter with like barely any snow on the ground. That, you know, they make the snow there on the mountains and whatnot when they need to. That's all it was this year, man. So I think they had a rough season, a lot of these places here in Jersey. And you know what, PA, they got some snow here and there, so they had it a little bit better. But Jersey was definitely hurting with it. But you're absolutely right, though. Snow is a nostalgic, like, novelty sort of thing. Like, sure, maybe we did have to shovel it back in the day, but it's not like we were driving and had to worry about conditions and everything of that nature. You know what I mean? Like, now we got to deal with all that stuff.
Yes. and you know, it's interesting too because the topic of the day is obviously musicals, and I don't remember ever seeing a snowstorm in a musical. Though Singing in the Rain, I've seen some very impressive practical effects, like the actual rainstorm on stage. Really killer. Really cool. We can get into that.
Yeah.
But you think about a lot of music, particularly, you know, Christmas music, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every other song at least references the snow. So it's part of like that cultural moment in the year. When it snows, you know it's almost Christmas time. It's Thanksgiving, New Year's.
Yeah.
There's just back-to-back holidays, and that's another reason why I like it so much.
Me too.
And the snow is sort of Mother Nature's way of saying, hey, by the way, your favorite time of year is just around the corner. So, like, it's a great feeling. You finally see those flakes.
I couldn't agree with you more, to be honest with you. That's my favorite time of year as well. And I agree with you in the sense that fall is like consider like winter in a sense. Listen, man, once Halloween is around the corner, holiday season has started, and I am pumped up, man.
Yes,
and birthday season too.
Yes.
I think I'm like 2 days before your birthday. I'm the 12th, and I think
you're the day before.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I always remember that too. Always wishing you happy birthday on Facebook and everything like that. Yeah, man. So yeah, let's get right into it. We could kind of start with how we both got into watching Broadway musicals and plays and whatnot. What interested us about it and things of that nature. So it started with me as far as really, really young when I saw my first Broadway play. It's obviously on my list because I said I only saw 5, but Beauty and the Beast.
Okay.
I only remember bits and pieces of it, but I just remember just being in that atmosphere, and there's something magical about being in a theater.
Yes.
Same thing with movie theaters. But something's real, so you feel some sort of energy, great energy, coming out of a Broadway theater, I would say. And I'll always remember that. And then what really, really got me into plays and whatnot is middle school plays. Not just because it was a way to get out of class, and you spent like an hour or two out of class and in the auditorium with your buddies and everything like that, but I remember some of the plays which you were in, along with Greg Ippolito too, and they were all directed by good old Mr. Barnum.
The late great,
yes. When I heard about his passing, that this was 3 weeks ago now, I believe.
Yes.
I was shocked. I was shocked, but shocked that like I couldn't believe that it happened. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And the funny part is, I didn't even have him as a teacher.
Oh, really?
Never had him as a teacher.
Wow.
But, dude, I'll tell you what. He still left such a huge impact on me because of the plays that he produced and directed for the middle school and everything like that.
When he passed, I one of the first thoughts that came to my mind after the initial shock, because my jaw hit the floor. I was distraught. That was really tough.
Yeah.
The initial thought I had was, the man was an institution all to himself. You think of an institution being a large group of people all working toward a common goal, and they all the synergy, like, all the parts are greater than, they make something better than the individual parts.
Correct.
And he did it all on his own.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, certainly you have the late great Joe Little to thank for the music.
Of course.
And that's a travesty too, because you think Barnum he was going to be 75 in July.
Was he?
So
okay.
Was he young? No, but anymore, that's young.
Yeah.
And the guy was full of life. I mean, he was playing Santa Claus every winter. That was his side hustle.
Really?
Yeah. I have the business card still. I wish I brought it. I have the business card. It's him in a red convertible, in the suit, waving to to the viewer, and he was Santa. And so it's what a distinct privilege to have met Santa Claus.
Right? Yeah. What a great way of putting it.
So I, like you, my first foray into drama and theater was Barnum through my brother.
Okay.
My brother, he and I did not overlap at all. He graduated. I immediately was in 6th grade. So for 6 straight years, Barnum was in our circle.
Right.
That was what we did after school.
Yeah.
So it was his 6 shows, 3 plays, 3 musicals, and then my 6 shows, 3 plays, 3 musicals.
Wow.
Back to back to back to back. And it was really bittersweet looking back on what he would do for everyone in the cast. He would either hand deliver or he would mail out a playbill, and on the reverse side, he'd write a note to each of the cast members and the crew members. And in his notes, he would always type up notes like all the thank yous, like thank principal and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
My mother always ended up getting a shout out because at the dress rehearsals, she'd bake like a few dozen cookies, and they passed into legend. Like you can look like from the first show I was in, he's like, thanks to Mrs. Mattia for the cookies, and by the 6th show, it's like for the now legendary cookies, and he was a diabetic, and he'd still have a couple. You had to have a couple. So I think of you think back, where did you spend your time? What did you spend your time doing? And I got a music degree. I'm a band guy. I'm a classically trained trombonist. But a lot of my time was spent on stage. And more so, I'd say more so in middle school, that's what I identified as. I was for sure a drama kid first, and band was fun. And then by, I'd say, early sophomore year of high school is when things really flipped. And it was great because I got to marry those two things because the band was directly involved in all of the musicals. So 4 of those 8 shows, like all my friends were in the pit. Like all the band people were in the pit. And I was even in the pit in The Wiz because I had such a small part. The first half of Act 1 and Act 2, I was playing trombone, and then I dipped. And I got on stage, yeah.
Wow,
so
I didn't know that.
The way we pulled it off was I had to leave during music so that it was less obvious.
Yeah.
And I was in costume, and I wore a choir robe on top because all the pit's in black. So I'm like hiding there trying to cover my shins, right? Because like clearly khaki. And then, halfway through a number, I'm like, all right, later. And I would dip and I'd go do whatever Emerald City number. I was Citizen number 4. It was the most useless part that you could have and still be in the show with speaking lines.
Wow.
So that was, and again, like, if that's how I'm going to spend my time in drama, that started to push me toward band because everyone's important all the time. Not that you aren't important with a small part in theater, but clearly, unless it's an important small part, a supporting role, it's not going to make as much impact. There's only so much you can do with your 1 or 2 lines.
Right.
It's harder to steal the show than it is to have a scene, for example.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Barlum was instrumental in, cultivating, because obviously there were a lot of us that were immediately drawn to it. Like, we started from the first show, and then there are other people who, oh, I'm in 8th grade now, or oh, I'm a senior now, and now I want to be involved. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But, you can, those people didn't have the same connection that we did with Barlum. Like, we grew up on that stage.
Right.
So, there were 4 of us that were in the 6 Play Club, the unofficial club. It was me, Greg, Vivian Vieira, and Andrew Frere.
And Frere,
all 4 of us were in all 6 shows.
Yeah.
And so, again, like, growing up with them, basically every day after school, easily 2 or 3 days after school, every week, we were all hanging out together.
Right.
In various, because we didn't always have all the scenes together, but that's okay because you're backstage or you're meeting new people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was the social aspect, but it was just fun. The arts are fun. It's a way to express yourself that in your day-to-day, in your, your 9 to 5, rarely are you going to have that outlet. Rarely. You either have to do it on, in your own free time, or you have to pay for those experiences because you're not the one creating those experiences.
Right.
Which is also a great time, like going to concerts and musicals and whatever.
Yeah.
So that was really, really critical, and he is directly responsible for all of those core memories.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. When I think back to middle school, yeah, I remember being in class. I remember where I was. I remember my first locker combination. You remember a handful of things.
Wow, yeah.
But the initial thought is, I'm on that stage. I'm running the curtains, my first show. So mad that I didn't get a speaking part. And then actually, funny story, I had to fill in because one of the drivers of the trucking company of that show, like that was part of the plot.
Yeah.
He was like puking his brains out the morning of the show. And so I had to step in. Oh. And so I did, after all, have a speaking part in that show, even though I had like very little prep work for it.
Yeah.
I had the lines on a clipboard, and I'm like reading, kind of my peripheral.
Were you like behind the truck part of it?
No,
like reading the line.
So it's like we were in an office, like just like 3 chairs lined up.
Yeah.
There's no props, there's no staging or sets, and behind us are other drivers walking back and forth, making the place look busy. And so I was just interacting with the other 2 drivers. Like, that was the whole thing. It wasn't very much, but it moved the plot along a little bit. And we needed somebody. And I think the way the hierarchy was, if you were in crew, which was very small, there was lights and there was curtains and maybe someone moving sets.
Sure.
Crew people were immediately first in line to cover other parts.
Gotcha.
Rather than have people double. At that time, sharing is caring. Everyone can be involved. Whereas, shows we did in high school, the Laramie Project, that was 6 different people. That's just the nature of the show. Which was also rather a poor choice. I think there were tens of people during the matinee. I think 16 or 17 people came to the show during the matinee.
Oh, really?
Because it's a downer. Like, you think of a musical, and like you said, just awe-inspiring.
Yes.
There's so much going
Joyous, all that stuff, yeah.
And I can flex my music history here. The reason why theater and movies are the way they are, like, bring down the lights, being quiet, kind of setting that tone.
Yeah.
Or 2 people are responsible. Franz Liszt and Richard Wagner. Liszt is the first solo performer to insist on people shutting up as he's playing and sort of, maybe not killing the lights, but maybe blowing out some candles because, there's not like, I don't think electricity is ubiquitous if it existed at the time.
Right.
My exact time frame, I'm not 100%. I don't think, not 100%. And then Richard Wagner goes full tilt. And he's problematic because he's really not a good guy.
Okay.
But it's so often that you have these really strong personalities end up being these really successful artists. So he had a concept, a lovely German word called Gesamtkunstwerk, which is total artwork.
Good for you for being able to pronounce that.
Right? Hey, listen, I got the degree.
That's right.
I have appearances to uphold. Right? So his idea was there shouldn't be a composer and a librettist and a set designer and a costumer. He wanted complete control over every aspect of the show, right down to the lighting. So he further says, like, it's got to be dark in here. The lights have to be on stage because that's where the focus is. It has to be quiet. I want full control over the lyrics and the music and the staging. And so what he does is he kind of forces, and that's uncommon anymore. You have a handful of people doing all those things. You have a team
with it, yeah.
But ultimately, that sets the tone for how we should be observing, in his case, opera, but concerts, musicals, any sort of performance now removes the focus from the audience because in Mozart's time, the lights are up, people are milling about, talking, eating, laughing, and that was normal, that was commonplace, and that was accepted. And after a certain point, artists, again, particularly Liszt and Wagner, say, enough is enough. The focus needs to be on why you're here in the first place.
Without a doubt.
Especially because those shows stop being less for the upper class and a little more accessible to the masses. And so a little bit of wrangling was in order because you can't really push around the people who are paying the bills. But the masses aren't paying the bills like your sponsors are, and anyone who commissioned the work. Those people, you let them do whatever the hell they want.
Right.
So it's really fascinating that we take that experience that I'm seeing The Dark Knight right behind you. That's the first one.
Yeah.
You go in there and it's dark, and if it wasn't dark, it wouldn't have the same impact. If it was noisy, people milling about, you tell them to shut up because it doesn't have the same impact. It's distracting. It removes you from kind of immersing yourself.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to do that when you have these distractions. So we have those 2 guys to thank for it.
Thank God for those 2 people.
Right.
Because I get pissed in the movie theater. Yeah. Especially, and there's not much you can do about it when it's like a younger group of teens or whatnot seeing a movie. And all they're doing is fooling around and laughing and everything.
Are on their phones.
On their phones, all that stuff. And I'll tell you what, it annoys me so much. Me in the movie theater, bro, I'm the almost pickiest guy. I have to have the right seats. I got to be in the middle. I got to be a little bit further back, not in the front seats, and it has to be quiet.
What's your go-to snack? What's your movie theater snack?
So I'm a real big fan of Red Vines.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. I love red vines, actually. I think they are superior to Twizzlers.
That is so funny.
I think that's a little bit of a hot take for some people.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
As someone who doesn't really care for either of them,
okay,
if you put a gun to my head, I still think I'd pick Twizzlers.
Okay.
It's so funny you bring up red vines. I assume you haven't seen a Harry Potter musical?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so very long story short, students at University of Michigan, their drama club, they wrote an entire musical based on Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And one of the running gags is that Ron is obsessed with red vines. He's eating them through the entire show.
Really?
And so until I had seen that, probably freshman or sophomore year, on YouTube, like recorded on like someone's phone, and like part 1, part 2, all the way through like part 20.
Yeah.
I had never even seen or heard of red vines. It's so funny to me that you bring that up, because that was a running gag for so long.
Dude, I put a poll on Instagram one day about Twizzlers or red vines, and Twizzlers obviously won, but I also think Twizzlers won because a lot of people don't know what red vines are.
Brand recognition, baby.
Brand recognition, absolutely. And dude, like, I only see them at movie theaters, really. I don't really see them much other place. Maybe a Walgreens here and there.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, maybe your pharmacy, convenience store, like, random assortment of shit.
Yeah.
You might find them.
Right.
I definitely bought them once out of principle. Like, I have to try them.
Yeah.
I also bought, the same running gag in the show is Squirt soda.
Never heard of that.
It is objectively horrible. It's grapefruit soda with pulp.
Oh. No, I don't think I would like that whatsoever.
So again, that became a running gag in the show, because like, who drinks Squirt?
Yeah.
Over and over. So fascinating. Red vine enjoyer.
Yeah. What about you, man? What's your go-to?
snack? I am no fan of Nestle as a corporation.
Okay.
But I am a sucker for Bunch of Crunch.
What is it called?
Bunch of Crunch.
Those are the balls that have like the almond crunches and everything.
No,
like
they're
that?
like, it's like a rice. It's like a Crunch bar with the crispy rice.
Okay, yeah.
In little pieces.
Oh,
Just a box full of these little nuggets of goodness.
Yeah.
And some people, what they'll do, which I was never crazy about, because it took me a long time to come around to like sweet and salty. Mm-hmm. Like even like chocolate covered pretzels was a long time coming for me. I was just never into that. Some people would just dump the box of Bunch of Crunch into the popcorn. And so as you go through the popcorn, you're getting these little bits of chocolate and crunchy. And I guess that's like what Moose Munch might effectively be.
I was even gonna say almost like those the kettle corn popcorn, like the salted caramel type of stuff.
Yeah,
kind of deal. Yeah,
I like, so people who are into that, like, I get that.
Yeah.
Me, I just want to like a chill with my box, a Bunch of Crunch, and usually, not always, an icy as well. Got to get your frozen Coke or whatever flavor you're into.
Do you mix them?
If I get, like, if the Coke is out,
yeah,
'cause I'll generally gravitate toward the Coke. If it's out, I'll usually mix blue and red.
Yes.
Because I love blue, but it's very samey after a while.
Yeah.
So even though I don't love cherry, having the two together is a great combo.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're on the same page on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we are on the same page as far as the Coke aspect for slushies. I'm not that big of a fan of it. Even though I love actual Coca-Cola, but always mixing the red and the blue.
Yes.
There's no other way for me in that sense when it comes to getting a slushie.
Yeah, and then the same goes for your Slurpee at 7-Eleven or whoever the hell else has their various. Mixing is always, unless there's a flavor that is head and shoulders like, oh wow, this limited edition, whatever, I have to try this unadulterated.
Right.
Gotta mix. Gotta have at least two going on.
Without a doubt.
Always.
Gotta make it a little interesting. Mixing it up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wonder what Liszt and Wagner would think about us drinking, frozen sodas and, munching on a popcorn and whatever, because that wasn't, like, there was no concession stand, it's
right.
not that I can think
I was also thinking, like, was he I think you mentioned before, he also said people shouldn't be obviously conversating, but also eating and drinking and whatnot, too. So do you think he would have been okay with that? Your personal opinion?
Wagner, for sure not.
For sure
Definitely,
not.
He listen, by all accounts, he was a bastard. He's really not a good guy.
Okay.
He just happens to be a phenomenal musician and had this brilliant concept of what he wanted and then went out and created it because it didn't exist.
Right.
Liszt, if you were quiet and you were focused, he probably wouldn't care. He's probably too busy playing anyway, because Wagner's not the performer. So if he wanted to be, he could be like prowling around to see who's not behaving themselves.
Right.
Liszt is too busy playing piano.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
So long as you don't distract him, yeah, you could probably get away with whatever.
Sure.
As long as you're being more or less toned down about it.
How strict was it with like that policy per se, that vision back in the day?
You know, I think it had to do with a lot of it depended on where, both geographically, bigger picture, and when. Because as time goes on, I mean, you think about Shakespeare. I mean, people were like throwing food at the performers, and that's fine. Because that's giving you immediate feedback on how well you're doing. How good is the show? How good are these performers?
Right.
For better or worse.
Right.
Whereas as time goes on, and also to what is the culture of that individual place, like, I mean, you know, Germans have a reputation for being sort of cold and very serious. And I played concerts in Austria and Germany, so I have direct experience. They are generally very warm and welcoming of the art form.
Yeah.
And because they take it so seriously, it's sort of misconstrued as, well, that's who these people are. No, they just really care. If I went out and played a concert like in the gazebo, in the borough, like in front of the Hall of Records, no one cares. No one's stopping by to listen. Not generally.
Right.
We had complete strangers attending these concerts. I don't know anybody in Austria.
Right.
And it's like a full house. So it's
just that culture. Yes.
It's a cultural thing as well. There is so much more emphasis on the arts over there, and particularly in your more so old world countries. While I was still at University of Delaware, we had an Austrian high school come and perform, and they were as good as we were at college, because that's how much they care about the arts.
That's amazing.
It was such an eye-opening experience, and they were so cool. They were such nice people, and they were so good at what they did, and they were just so happy to be there sharing the craft.
Yeah.
It was not to show off. It was not a competitive thing. It was, hey, this is a cultural exchange. This is what we do at home. We want to see what you do here. And that's not to say we didn't put on a good show.
Right.
But it really kind of put things into perspective for us. We're like, that guy's 14. And he's playing what the wind ensemble's playing, what the orchestra's playing. And, we're sitting in the symphonic band, like, really judging ourselves very harshly because we're not doing that, right?
Being your own worst critic.
Oh, and that's another thing about the arts in general. I think a lot of people have performance anxiety.
For sure.
A lot of stage fright, whatever you want to call it. And, what's interesting? I think a lot of people who are good at what they do, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't. A lot of people who are professionals who earn a living doing whatever it is, acting, singing, dancing, movies, TV, whatever, I do think a lot of them still have that performance anxiety. They either have coping mechanisms,
right,
or they drug themselves with no bullshit. Certainly there are people taking beta blockers or eating like 15 bananas to calm themselves down.
Yeah.
Or they channel, what I try to do is I channel that nervous energy into what I'm doing, and I put that, because the energy is there. You can react to it, or you could be proactive with it.
Right. You could almost translate the energy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what I tried to impart with my students, I didn't teach long, but I was a music teacher. I did the thing.
Good for you.
What I tried to impart on my students is, it is okay to have those feelings and those emotions.
Yeah.
They are natural. They are normal. It is not okay to allow them to consume you or to prevent you from doing what you need and want to do. With what your time on stage, your time in the practice room, in rehearsal, wherever you are, you can't be your own worst enemy, because that gnawing subconscious, that will always get you, that will always win.
Of course.
If you are not actively working on that, it will always win.
Without a doubt. And you know what? That's a great piece of advice that you gave to your students and everything like that, because not only with performing, you could use that with anything in life. That those same type of words right there. Absolutely, you could. That's great. That's great, man. So how long were you teaching for?
So I taught just the 2 years before the pandemic. I was substitute teaching the year after I graduated. I was in Delaware. I wanted to see if I wanted to stick around. And while it is by no means the worst state I've ever been to, it was just different enough from New Jersey that I wasn't happy with things there. As it was, I attended a board meeting. I attended a school board meeting because my co-teacher's job was on the line. They were axing elementary music. And so I got up there after I graduated. I had no obligation to these people anymore, but it was that important to me. I got up and I said, this program, the elementary program, you have to treat the whole of the music from, I think they started in 4th grade like we did, maybe 5th grade. From 5th grade to senior year, 12th grade. Mm-hmm. That is a house. And the elementary music is the foundation. You can't remove the foundation without the rest of the house crumbling. It does not work.
Right.
Because then your foundation becomes middle school. And you know what the hell we were like in middle school. We are raging hormonal beasts.
Yeah,
and I taught middle school. I taught 3rd grade through 8th grade. And what every teacher will tell you is that something happens between 6th grade and 8th grade. And 7th graders are monsters. It's nothing personal. It's not anything they have any control over.
Right.
But it's in your development, late 6th grade to early 8th grade, you just become a beast.
Yeah.
And you don't do any of the things you're supposed to do. You are
a rebel,
completely guided by hormones and rebelliousness.
Yeah. Yes.
Took the word out of my mouth. So I did it. I taught 3rd grade up to 8th grade music. The 2 years prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I taught the last 3 months over the computer, and it was miserable. Yeah. I said, you know what? I don't know when this is going to be over, and I don't really... I wasn't happy where I was.
Right.
Because as it was, I was doing basically the jobs of 2 people. I did 3rd to 8th grade 3rd to 8th grade general music. I did 5th to 8th grade lessons, which included strings, even though we didn't have an orchestra. I did 6th through 8th grade band, and I did 6th through 8th grade choir. That's 2 distinct jobs. That's a band job and a general choir, like general vocal job. That's 2 jobs that I did.
And those are 2 pretty big jobs.
Yes, but we're always the first on the chopping block. So between all of that and teacher pay, frankly...
Yeah.
The pandemic was the nail in the coffin, and I was actually at a music store for almost 2 years. And then I found, I'm in tech now, so it's been a complete 180. But we're not here to talk about my, professional life.
Yeah, sorry, I was just curious. I was curious about it. Yeah,
and I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm wary of I think anyone who's watching is they haven't even mentioned Broadway yet. Which
we did a little bit. Yeah, we did.
And listen, I am happy to gush about music and the arts in general, but I am sensitive to the topic of the day. So you want to steer me back on track, you let me know. Well, we'll go there.
We'll steer back on track right now with this question, and then we can get to our top 5 lists. How important is the score for a Broadway play to you? Do you believe, like you said before, it's the foundation of the play itself? Or does that come after maybe a script or a screenwrite of a certain story?
In the chronology, the script almost always comes first. Because then you've got to write words and lyrics thereafter. Now, I like to use the Billy Joel, Elton John dichotomy because they're 2 very famous singer-songwriters on piano, and they approach music completely backwards. Billy Joel will write music and figure out lyrics to go to his music.
Okay.
Elton John has Bernie Taupin. Bernie writes words, and Elton John writes music to the words. It's completely backwards, and yet they both had an immensely successful career.
Yeah.
Either way, those things come after your plot. What is the show about? Unless something comes to you in a dream, and I have this brilliant song, and now I need to craft a musical around it. Very uncommon. I'm sure it has happened. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Right.
Almost always, words and lyrics come after. Now, that said, you don't have a musical without it. You have a play.
Right.
And so anyone who... you talk about Broadway, I think the overwhelming majority of the shows are musicals.
Correct, yeah.
There are plenty of plays, but they are in the minority, and they may have moved off-Broadway or off-Broadway, which we can get to why off-Broadway's not... Off-Broadway has a distinct definition. There's Broadway, there's off-Broadway, and then there's off-Broadway. I don't know what the rules are. I don't know when these things happen or how.
Yeah.
But once a show leaves Broadway and they move off Broadway, that is still a distinct place. There is a handful of theaters in New York that are off Broadway. From there, if you're not in Broadway or off Broadway, you're not on Broadway. You're well removed from that scene. So I'm sure a lot of those shows without music or one-man shows, Chaz Palminteri he did a one-man show of A Bronx Tale, which is about his life. Fascinating stuff. That has no music, and it's still very successful. But the people want music when they go to Broadway.
It's more popular with it. Absolutely.
And so I guess that brings us to our topic, because I have a high degree of confidence that everything you're going to reference and everything I'm going to reference is a musical.
Okay. Yeah. Well, without a doubt. So how we're going to work our top 5 favorite Broadway shows, musicals, I might as well just say that at this point. We'll go 5 down. We'll go back and forth with each other. I'll do my number 5. You do number 5, 4, and go on like that. So my number 5 is the one that I mentioned before that I saw, Beauty and the Beast. The reason why it's at my number 5 is that I don't really remember it that well. But it'll always have a special place in my heart for being the first Broadway play. And it also helps that my parents said it's one of their favorite Broadway plays that they've seen.
Right.
And obviously they would remember it more than me. I was younger. I was a lot younger. So Beauty and the Beast, it's a story that obviously I already knew. I've seen the movie before and everything. Classic story. And that's my number 5 right there. I think, it's off Broadway. See, here we go now. Is it off Broadway or is it off Broadway, this show right now? Do you know?
I'm not certain.
It's not running. It hasn't been running for a while.
Okay. So that would you would more categorize it that it's not in production, it's not running. It doesn't, it's not in existence. So you can't categorize it in any of those 3 because those shows, to be on Broadway, off Broadway, or off Broadway, the show has to exist currently. You have to be able to go see it.
Gotcha.
So, I know that's incredibly confusing because I only really figured that out when I was a teenager. Greg was in an off Broadway show.
Oh, okay.
And I said, well, isn't this off Broadway? We're not on Broadway? He said, no, not exactly. And that just raised further questions. I wish I had a good definition for you, but the best I can do is if you're not immediately on Broadway, but you're still in a big theater in Manhattan, you're off Broadway. And then there are a bunch of little theaters hidden throughout the city that you may see shows at, but they're not. That's not a Broadway show. It's not off Broadway. It's, and I don't know.
I think you explained it pretty good right there, actually.
It's weird because we are lucky that we live so close to Broadway. There are plenty of shows in Chicago of the same scale.
Like same caliber, right?
But it's not Broadway. So do you call that a Broadway show, though it's not on Broadway in Manhattan? Like I just have so many questions.
I don't know. I think how I would categorize it is that if it has that upscale stage work and music and everything of that nature, if all the same money, work, and effort is being put into that play like they do in New York Broadway plays, I would consider it a Broadway play.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, right. I think any big, huge play, I would consider that one for sure. Yeah. But yeah, that's my number 5, Beauty and the Beast. We could move on to your number 5.
Well, I think it's a good choice, even though you don't remember it. I mean, we have the movie as reference material, and I'm sure you've seen the movie a little more recently than whenever you were a kid and saw the musical. And as is Disney's MO, there is always some music. I would hesitate to call it a musical movie. There's plenty of music, but I don't know if just those songs could fill out the musical. I think they would probably have added a few, but I haven't seen it on Broadway, so I can't speak from any sort of educated perspective on that.
I'm not sure if they added like original like music and whatnot to it that was out of the movie. I'm not too sure. Obviously, they definitely had their classic songs that made the movie what it is and everything like that. But that's a good point to bring up. I'm not too sure either.
And what's so interesting about that too, again, talking from the musical music. perspective, not from Broadway musicals perspective. even though, let's say they had a full array of songs, they couldn't even squeeze them all into the musical. That all still has to be orchestrated. You have to now take those parts, and I'm sure some of them overlap, but some of them don't. You may have fewer people in the pit than you have music, than you have parts in the music. So a lot of times you'll get the, you won't have a saxophone player, you won't have a flute player, you won't have a clarinet player, you'll have a reed player, and that person does them all. They have a cool little stand. You could, like, you nest your flute, you nest your clarinet, you cradle your saxophone, and you've got to juggle them throughout the whole show.
Really?
Brass does that to a much smaller degree. Like a trumpet player may he may have a flugelhorn, he may have a cornet, but he's not going to be doubling on French horn. He's not going to be doubling on trombone. I may double on baritone, but it's so functionally like a small difference. There's really no point. Hell, I had to play a cello book once because we had no cello player. And I played trombone for most of the show, but anytime the trombone was tacit, that's not playing for those of you keeping score at home. Anytime they were tacit, I would just flip to the cello book. I sort of doubled on that show.
Wow, I didn't know that people... I didn't know that musicians did that on stage or in the pit, as you would put it.
So
wow, okay.
It really... You can absolutely make a living just playing your instrument if you pick the right ones. And it's terrible to say that, but that is the truth.
Yeah.
So, like, I could play trombone on a show, and I get my paycheck.
Yeah.
If you play 3 books, you don't get 3 paychecks, but you get your paycheck plus bonuses because you're doing more than your fair share.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
And I have relative certainty of that because every playhouse is different, every director is different, and every budget, most importantly, is different. But in general, the reed players and the keyboard players are the most valuable players because your keyboard, not only can they play piano, they can play synthesizer, which can do anything you want, depending on how many people you want to hire.
Yeah.
And they can also play a handful of percussion instruments. You can play xylophone, vibraphone, marimba, because they're set up like keyboards.
Yeah, right.
So long as you have a basic understanding of sticking, done. Hop over there. Go play. Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
So I live and die by trombone, but it is very niche. You either need a trombone or you don't. Whereas a woodwind player, I should say, yeah, maybe my primary is saxophone, but if they need flute and clarinet, I can still get that job. Maybe I'm at a disadvantage compared to people who that's their primary, but I can still win that job if I win the audition.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really fascinating. It's a whole, because most people
really
never see those people. And that brings me to number 5.
Okay.
I would love to put it higher, but I've seen so many great shows, and frankly, it kind of overstayed its welcome. It's another one of those Broadway shows that's very long running, and it's had 1 billion people play all those parts. My number 5 is Chicago.
That's one I want to see really bad.
It is such a good show, and it appeals to me as a performer because the set is very limited. The show I saw had risers where the pit is on stage.
Oh.
And the cast members could come through the pit. There was a door in, and they could like walk down or whatever. I don't know how they had it set up.
Yeah.
And they actually interacted with the players. At one point, Roxy, the lead, takes the baton from the conductor and starts conducting the ensemble while the conductor reads the newspaper about Roxy and the murder that had occurred.
Really?
I love that tasteful breaking of the fourth wall.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
So beyond the risers, there were 2 ladders that would swing out from the wings. That's it. That's the whole set, the whole show. And as a result, everything else had to be so on point. So the music was phenomenal.
Yeah.
The acting was phenomenal. And the staging, despite being incredibly minimalist, you basically had the front of the stage, that walkway into the pit, and you had these ladders that two of the 6 women would hang off of while they're doing the He Had It Coming number. And it's just like that was the first show I saw in high school. I think I'd seen shows prior. The timeline doesn't 100% ring a bell.
Right.
But I remember being blown away by how good the show was without being flashy. There were no huge backdrops. There were not massive dance numbers. There was no special effects. It was just very raw.
Yeah.
and it made a tremendous impression on me. It showed me how much you can do with your craft without, like, putting lace on the garbage can, if you will.
Sure.
If your show sucks, you can't beautify it to make it good. But if your show's good, you can trim the fat, and it's still a really good show.
Without a doubt. I 100% agree with you.
And they did a good job with the movie, too. I would argue the recording of the movie is a little better, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
The Broadway recording I have is of the 91 cast, and they're by no means bad.
Yeah.
It just, like, the way their interpretation was just not, like, my favorite.
Sure.
And I'm sure I'll catch some flack for that, and I don't care. That's my opinion.
Yeah, right.
You have me on the show. That for sure is my number 5. It really deserves to be higher on the list, but I've been involved in enough shows that there are other more important shows to me that I've got to place above it. So Chicago has to be there, but it gets number 5.
I like your reasoning for why that's your number 5 because of what it proves, like you said before, of how it could be a great show, but at the same time be almost minimalistic, like in a sense, you know? Like, that's great.
It's like
that's
choosing
great.
between my children. How can you choose you really shouldn't.
Yeah, right.
Probably could if you know.
Yeah.
But honestly, this is a great topic because I think the more you've seen, the harder the question gets, even though it's fundamentally the same question. You haven't asked different people different questions. And I've been involved in or seen over a dozen shows, and picking 5 out of a dozen is not terribly difficult, but when they
still
are
tricky,
all like neck and neck, it makes for a very interesting conversation.
Without a doubt. All right, awesome.
Okay, so now I got to know, now that you've gotten the one that you sort of kind of remember out of the way, now this is the meat and potatoes.
This
now
is the meat and potatoes now. So my number 4, the total opposite of Beauty and the Beast, where Beauty and the Beast was the first one I ever saw. This is the most recent one I ever saw, which was this past winter. The Phantom of the Opera.
Ah, okay.
Now, Phantom of the Opera, I thought was very good. It was very good. But I was almost left a little, like, disappointed a little bit because of the expectation that I had for it. And I'm not downing it in any way, but so many people have seen it. First off, it's been around for a while, and have said how great it was, great it is. And, it's the same thing I do to myself with movies and everything. My expectation levels are so high, so I'm just telling you my experience with it leaving the theater and whatnot. The play itself, fantastic story. Fantastic story to it. The music's also incredible with it. It was so cool, the very beginning of the play, where you have the chandelier on the stage floor, and they're auctioning it off and everything like that. And I almost jumped when you heard that classic music, dun, 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 and the chandelier starts flying up. Incredible. It set the whole tone for the play. And I thought it was done so craftfully, like really, and it really did. The tone stuck throughout the whole play as well, beautifully. Couldn't stand the boyfriend. I wanted her to be with the goddamn Phantom. Okay,
fair.
You know, and you know, to simplify it, really, like. And sorry if I won't get into too much spoilers if you want to see it. Well, actually, this is a show that just left Broadway. Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. My grandmother treated us to go see it.
Okay.
Because she never seen it either, and she really wanted to see it bad before it left. But the last scene of the play with the half mask there on the chair, like he vanished. The Phantom has vanished. Incredible. It's a sad story in a sense.
Yeah.
And I really feel for that. You know, it's almost like a what do they call that? Like a hopeless romantic sort of deal with it.
Yeah, I mean the quintessential hopeless romantic.
Yes, right. And I just thought it was incredible. Fantastic play. Sure, I said in the beginning, was I left a little disappointed? Yes, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'll tell you why. I think I know why now. It's because of what you were saying as far as it being minimalistic in a sense as far as set designs and everything like that. I think I was expecting a huge extravaganza sort of deal, like one of the ones I'm going to mention next in my number 3. But yeah, fantastic play. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Well, is it on your list moving forward?
It is not on my list.
Okay, so go ahead, talk about it.
So I saw it in 2017, maybe late 2016. It was a senior year of college.
Okay.
I took the bus up and I saw it, and I will say this: it was by no means bad. It was an above average show.
Sure.
It was a good performance. I felt like, for Broadway, because it's not cheap, I felt like I'd gotten my money's worth.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it absolutely overstayed its welcome.
Yeah.
It existed for as long as it did because The Lion King existed for as long as it did. They were in constant competition to stay on Broadway, lest one gain the title or lose the title of longest running show at that time.
Okay.
So I think between that and Phantom being sort of a classic where even if you're not at all an aficionado of Broadway, you're still aware of Phantom of the Opera. You've probably seen The Mask. You may have heard the main theme, as you mentioned.
Right.
And there was actually, I think, I wouldn't call it a techno remix, but there was definitely a remix that got popular in the early 2000s of that, the Phantom of the Opera, like the main theme, sort of like a dance remix.
Yes, yeah.
That got really popular, sort of as a gag, and so then it enters the mainstream, and it almost becomes a parody of itself. Mm-hmm. I felt, despite not being as special effect heavy as I thought it was going to be, still relied heavily on that. Though I will agree with you, the whole chandelier thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew eventually it was going. It's not going to sit on the stage the whole time,
right?
But it was still a great moment.
Yes.
It was still very like. Buckle up.
Yeah, right.
Happening. You're actually watching Phantom of the Opera. Mm-hmm. Not a bad show, but did not crack my top 5.
Did not crack your top 5. Understandable, completely understandable in my opinion. People that I've told that I've seen the show afterwards, they said they've seen it. Like one of my friends' parents, they've seen it about like 5 or 6 times, which I was surprised to hear about that after me seeing it. And I was like, why 5 or 6 times? It was like, well, I'll tell you what, I think they definitely downgraded the show as the years went on. That's what they said.
Wow.
That's what they said. But it was a lot better. Like they might have seen it like 2 or 3 years ago, but they've also seen it when they were like kids as well, or teens, whatever the case may be. And they said it was a lot better back in the day. So I was like, interesting. Okay. Very interesting.
Fair.
Yeah.
This is actually my honorable mention. Didn't make the list, but it is an excellent show. It's along those same lines of like seeing it over and over again, because the women who were sat adjacent from us, they said like, this is the 3rd time this week. I was like, all right.
Whoa.
They were huge fans of Clay Aiken, who had joined the show recently. The show I'm referencing is Spamalot. And my only regret of Spamalot was not seeing it when... oh God, I blanked on his name. Frankenfurter from Rocky Horror Picture Show. The butler in Clue. Why am I blanking on his name? He's one of my favorites.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I can't think of the name.
I'll wake up in a cold sweat tonight and I'll remember. Or I will look him up.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say Spamalot was funny. So funny because it's Monty Python. It's basically Holy Grail with some other gags from all of the other years peppered in. It was mostly Holy Grail. The one thing that it suffered from, in my opinion, was that, and this is my biggest critique of musicals, they fall way down on my list when they commit the sin of having a song for the sake of having a song so we can call it a musical.
Almost forced in.
Yeah, to me, the music must advance the plot. This either needs to be a significant scene from the movie or play that we are now fleshing out and we want to include music and dance. Or it had to have already been, musical and, again, it has to advance the plot. It has to be significant. It has to make a difference. If you're just adding music for the sake of, well, we want to make a musical, that's fine. And Monty Python, those guys don't take themselves seriously.
Right.
So there is a whole song that the Lady of the Lake sings, Whatever Happened to My Part. It's funny. Like, it's sort of, it's self-aware that this didn't need to be a musical, but we wanted it to be a musical.
Yeah.
So it is. And as such, it's great. I would highly recommend seeing it.
Okay.
But the soundtrack does not, like, I don't catch myself, like, those songs don't randomly float into my head. It's just not that catchy. It's just not that important.
Right.
Handful of good songs. None of them are bad.
Right.
But it commits the sin of, we just wanted it to be a musical.
Right.
So let me, before I forget, Frank.
Yeah, for sure.
Frank and Fur. I'm going to be so mad that I don't remember this.
Yeah, I get like that sometimes too, dude.
Do I not have... Oh, I don't have reception in your basement.
Oh, you know what? Let me look it up then real quick. Hold on.
Do Rocky Horror Picture Show? Frankenfurter. I'm going to be so mad that I can't remember this. It's on the tip of my tongue. He's a British actor.
Tim Curry.
Jesus Christ.
You know what? I knew that freaking name too.
So at one point, he was King Arthur in the musical.
Really?
And by the time we'd seen it, it was closing that week.
Oh.
And so by that point, they had gone through many different iterations. And the cast was great. By no means, they weren't bad. But it would have been great to see Tim Curry.
Of course.
Phenomenal to see him. And Clay Aiken was good, but, like, I don't care about Clay Aiken. One cool breaking of the fourth wall that they did. If you've watched any Monty Python, Flying Circus in particular, at the end of the theme, which is just the Liberty Bell March by John Philip Sousa, instead of getting the last hit, you get... and a foot comes down and crushes whatever's on screen. They made a golden foot on a little pedestal, like a trophy, and they hid it under someone's chair. And they called this woman up on stage, and they took a Polaroid of her. So it's like the whole cast, this woman is shaking.
Yeah.
And she's got this Polaroid of her and the Broadway cast, and she's got the foot. I don't know if she got to keep it or not.
Right,
I hope
right.
so. It's like... They really, again, they didn't take themselves seriously. And that's why I kind of forgive the whole songs because songs.
Yeah.
But that's why it didn't crack the top 5, because it commits the sin. And I can't very well promote that show when it does one of the things I like the least.
Right. Gotcha.
So now I have to say this starts to get really hard, because there are a handful that I've been in or that I've seen that really speak to me.
Okay.
And I think it's important as well to balance the new shows that are really good with some classic shows that are really good, that have maybe been on Broadway 2 and 3 times because they're that good and people have a demand to see those shows.
Okay.
So I think I'll save that one classic show that makes the list for later on.
Okay.
And I will say... Actually, you know what? I might put 2 on the list, and I'll say number 4 is West Side Story.
Okay, gotcha. That's one I have not seen, actually.
It is excellent in every sense of the word, because everything is cranked up to 11. The acting is generally very good, because you're not making West Side Story if you can't cut it. But that aside, the dance numbers are always really good, and for me to say that, and I don't give a shit about the dance numbers, for that to stick out to me... that's saying something. It's always impeccably choreographed, but it's the music that does it for me. There are many great songs, but I think the most popular and the most important to the show is America, because it forces the audience to come to terms with more advanced music. The meter, we're going to get very technical now, but meter dictates generally how many beats in the measure or the bar in the one snippet of the music.
Okay.
So typically we count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. America is in 2, but it's also in 3. We use 6/8 as the time signature as opposed to 4/4. In 4/4, you have 4 beats, and the fundamental, your bass beat, is a quarter note, 4. 6/8 has 6 subdivisions, 6 beats, if you will, and the subdivision is an eighth note, half the length of a quarter note. But because 6 is divisible by 3 and by 2, you can break the measure into 2 3s,
Okay.
or 3 2s.
Huh.
So you can do 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2, and no one had heard that before on Broadway. You hear that at the Met. You hear that from the New York Phil and the Philadelphia Orchestra. You don't hear that on Broadway. That's not what you get on Broadway. And there it was. And this was early on. We're talking easily maybe 60 years ago that West Side Story exists, and that's revolutionary. It's in the grand scheme.
Yes.
In the grand scheme, that's not really incredible in terms of like what a musician normally experiences and what they can play and what they're comfortable with. But I think for the layman, that's massive. That fundamentally changes what we should expect from a musical. And then the musical is great. The plot is great. It was topical without being too without driving home the point too much, because it's Romeo and Juliet. The plot is not unique, but you add, rather than two families of the high society or from royalty or whatever, instead you now have two races.
Right.
Because they're both lower class. The Sharks and the Jets are not middle class people. They're street people.
Right.
But because you have race as the factor instead of class or society or money or whatever, it adds a new twist to Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't end the same way as Romeo and Juliet. I mean, that last scene it's a showstopper, which normally you think of a showstopper as like, oh, this is the big number. Everyone's singing and dancing, and like this is the climax of the musical.
Yeah.
But in stark contrast, the climax of the musical is damn near silent. Maria has a tearful soliloquy, and she's frustrated with how things turned out and how things even were beforehand. And she has a gun at the same time. So everyone's kind of held hostage to experience this with her at the same time. That's the climax of the musical, not the big singing, dancing number.
Right.
So it's so weird because West Side Story is core to Broadway.
Yeah.
It's been here many times. They've had movies. It's a fun book to play, man. It is so fun. And it's challenging too. For that to be core, and yet to do away with so many conventions, really tells you where things started to go mid-century for Broadway. That's why it's so important. I think a lot of people would say it's their favorite musical. It's very accessible. It's very good.
Yeah.
And it's very present. Like you get it a lot.
Very well known.
The movie just came out last year, right?
Yes, yeah, and won several awards too. I mean, we're talking about Spielberg also, who directed it.
So you have this great source material, and then you can remove it from the stage, which gives you great creative flexibility. And I think, I have not seen it, but from what I understand, they were very true to, I think, the spirit of the show, despite being on film. And to me, that has to make most people's lists. If you haven't seen it, like that, obviously, that I don't think it realistically could. But for people who are experienced, who've seen a lot of it, that's really good objectively. And it's really important objectively.
Sure,
so I would feel bad if I didn't include it. And I actually bumped Cabaret off the list as like one of the older shows that I think really deserves its part. Because it's just fun. Like, I had a good time being involved. But it doesn't do the heavy lifting that West Side Story does. And so, another honorable mention. I have a lot of honorable mentions. Well, I'm going to keep cheating.
Dude, I actually have an honorable mention too.
Okay.
Because I'm just realizing now that there is one other Broadway show I saw.
No kidding. Okay. This is groundbreaking. What do you got?
It was awful.
Oh, okay. Oh, this is going to be great.
Spider-Man.
Was it bad?
Terrible. Do you remember hearing those stories about the Spider-Man play? It's about how people got injured and everything, of them swinging on the ceiling and everything like that? It's
like Peter Pan, but worse. Like, the gimmick in Peter Pan is that Peter flies around.
Right,
So you have Peter Pan without Peter Pan, and you're destined for failure.
Yeah.
So, okay, I did hear that. I appreciate the confirmation. I now have no desire to go seek that out.
Well, dude, I don't think that lasted long at all. Not long at all, but yeah. Not even worth to talk about that much, to be honest with you.
Funny.
All right, I'm going to move on to my number 3.
Yeah, some good shows.
The Lion King.
How was it?
Bro, you didn't see The Lion King?
Didn't see it.
Fantastic.
And shame on me. That's my favorite Disney movie.
Oh yeah, it's one of my.
Shame on me.
Ooh. One of my top 5 animated movies. Period. Like not even just Disney animated movies. Phenomenal. So going into the Broadway play after after knowing such a fantastic movie.
Yeah, you have very high expectations.
Very high expectations, and boy, did they succeed, and probably went higher than my expectations because of the spectacle, the set pieces, the costume design. Dude, I am telling you, man, if you want to see just bright colors, beautiful atmosphere on the stage and everything like that, like during the daytime scenes and nighttime scenes, it was just fantastic. Obviously, the music is incredible too, and the story of The Lion King is great.
I think it's Hamlet.
It is Hamlet. Yes.
There's a trend. Disney just, takes Shakespeare and rehashes
it. Yeah, right. And they do a great job doing it. They do. You got to give them some props with it. Yeah, right. That's the play. The Lion King's the show that I kind of mentioned before when it came to Phantom of the Opera, where I now expect a spectacle.
Right.
And The Lion King just gave that spectacle, and it gave me expectations for every Broadway play that I see going forward. That same expectation, like, wow, this is what Broadway is. The Lion King was my number 1 for a while before I saw other plays. But yeah, man, fantastic. I believe it definitely is still running. It is still running. I can confirm that with you right now. But I don't know how long it's going to stay on for, because I feel like it could be any year now, just because of how long it's been on Broadway.
Yeah, and Phantom's gone. Now they have no obligation to stick it out. They won.
Right.
They won the battle. So as long as it's running, and with your seal of approval, I might have to make a pilgrimage up there and see The Lion King.
It is fantastic, and I could see it going on for 5, maybe even 10 more years, and then stop. To be honest with you, because The Lion King is just a classic movie. It's very well known, and it's just a great time. Like, I feel like The Lion King is one of those Broadway shows that, like, even if you're not really into Broadway that much and plays, that, I know The Lion King, I'll go see that.
Very approachable.
Yes, very approachable.
Very accessible for the masses, and, it's so funny. I mentioned Elton John before. That's Elton John, and it's excellent. And I don't think there's a Tarzan musical, but
I think there used to be. To be back in the day, yeah.
Because that was Phil Collins.
Yes,
did that soundtrack.
Right.
You know what I learned the other day? Not only did he do the soundtrack for the movie, he re-recorded the soundtrack in like 3 or 4 different languages, rather than do the English version with subtitles. He dubbed them.
Really?
Yeah. Really impressive shit.
That is high amounts of talent. Huge amounts of talent.
And it's, again, a bit of a bastard. Not to the same extent Wagner was, but a bit of a bastard. And yet, was it Genesis, and was Phil Collins on his own, wrote, music to Tarzan? Prolific, brilliant musician.
Yeah.
And always, there just, unfortunately, a lot of people who really reach that genius level of art.
Yeah. They want to take everything into their own hands.
They may be a little problematic.
Sure, right.
A little bit.
Right.
All right, I'm so glad to hear that about The Lion King. That's definitely my favorite Disney movie. I found a few years back a phenomenal a cappella medley of The Lion King. I will send to you. You could throw it in the description.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So good. My only complaint with it is whoever's playing Timon tries too hard to be Nathan Lane, and it's terrible. But once you get through that initial, because they start with "Can you feel the love tonight?" and it ramps up from there.
Yeah, makes sense.
So he tries too hard to be Nathan Lane, and it falls flat. But otherwise, by the time you get to the Circle of Life at the very end, it blow your tits off. It's just spectacular.
Okay, and dude, I'm actually I enjoy acapella as well, so definitely send that over to me too.
Yeah, and I have another one. It comes from a show I can't even remember the name of because it has no appeal to me whatsoever. But the song is "I Won't Send Roses," and the guys who won the acapella championships like 3 or 4 years in a row did a version of that. And it is chilling. It is incredible shit.
Okay.
Incredible. I'll send that to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw in the description if you want.
Yeah.
So I guess my number 3, and now it's excruciating. Now it's really difficult because they really all belong. Like number 1, number 2, number 1, number 3. But I will say my number 3 is Young Frankenstein.
Dude, I am in love with that movie.
Musical is brilliant.
Is it? Because
somehow, despite Mel Brooks not having the insane amount of control he would for his normal productions, because a lot of his later stuff involved a woman named Susan Stroman, and she did a lot of work on the musical, but I still think he wrote the music or the lyrics or both. Like, the guy is great at what he does.
Yeah.
I think beyond what most people think of, like, oh, Blazing Saddles, it's hilarious, and yeah, he's great at that, but to also be good at the musical portion is very impressive, because usually, again, these geniuses, they start to focus, and to actually have the multidisciplinary skill and talent. Mm-hmm. So that does a really good job of not having any unnecessary songs. All of the music feels right. All of the music, basically the one-off random scenes that don't really have a lot of sway in the movie, they get songs. And so the very first song after the overture is they have the funeral procession for Victor von Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And there is no, like, they don't really do that in the movie. That's like very brief. Like, he's dead, and then they move to New York.
Right.
So they have a whole song for that. They have a whole song for the love interest between Victor and Inga. They have a whole song for the dynamic between Igor and Frederick, which is probably the best song in the whole show, Together Again.
Okay.
Phenomenal duets. That's probably my favorite in the whole show. And even Inspector Kemp gets a song, I think. Yeah, he gets a song when the monster gets loose. It makes so much sense to put all that energy, that frenetic energy of there's a monster loose in Transylvania, into a musical number. And there's several, actually, musical numbers that relate to that. One when the monster initially gets loose, and there's another one where I think earlier on when the monster is awake and alive, but they're trying to keep it under wraps.
Right.
That's when Putting on the Ritz happens. They move it from on stage with the scientists. They move that to immediately after the monster wakes up, but before anyone knows the monster exists. That's a distraction from the monster existing for all the townspeople. So I thought that was very interesting, taking original source material and just shuffling the deck a bit. That, right, I think, was actually a better use of the song than in the movie, even though it made perfect sense in the movie. It was just beautifully done. It was a great time. It was very funny. And,
dude, I'll tell you what. I'm so glad to hear that now, like how you said about The Lion King.
If you can find it on YouTube in parts, you have to see it. It's excellent. And it's funny, after the bows and whatever, they sang some random shit, and they were like, maybe next year Blazing Saddles, and I would love a Blazing Saddles musical.
That would be awesome,
dude. It was so many years ago. It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. But, no.
Like, just that bit of fan service was enough to get me home from New York. It really, like, that has so much potential to be a great musical.
Yeah.
Because it's still Mel Brooks. It's still the source material.
Yeah.
But it's number 3. Because there are 2 other more important shows I feel like I have to put above Young Frankenstein. For as good as it was, there's no movie. It hasn't come back. It doesn't get the same touring,
Yes.
So it's great. It's phenomenal. Should be number 1, but there's so much other competition.
Right, exactly. So let's get into them now. We got number 2 now. Number 2, Wicked.
Oh. Okay.
Dude, Wicked. And this was, besides Phantom of the Opera, was that the second most that was the second most recent play that I've seen. But at the same time, this was maybe 4 years ago I seen it.
Okay.
Still has an impact on me, because I'll tell you what, the story in that is so incredible. The twist with the Wicked Witch, Wicked Witch, the Wicked Witch of the West. how she was actually a very good person and everything like that, and how she was portrayed in the movie versus how she's portrayed in the show, in the play. It's the whole backstory of her, almost the behind the scenes of her too, from that and Wizard of Oz. And my mind was actually blown of how they took that concept of the Wizard of Oz and pulled it off so beautifully with their story and making it work.
Yeah.
That's what's important with that. You could throw in all this random BS to make it fit with the Wizard of Oz storyline, but it wasn't. You have to sell it, but it didn't feel like random BS being thrown into that story.
Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a book first.
You could be right. I'm not too sure about that.
But that's even all the more impressive because you're not even working from a script. You're not working from a screenplay. You're not working from a movie, any source material at all that is analogous to being on stage.
Right.
Movie and theater in the grand scheme are very close. They're kissing cousins.
Right.
A book? So they had to come up with all the lyrics and all the music.
Yes, right.
And that's actually my favorite part of the show. I've not seen the full show. I've seen the bits and pieces, and all the music is excellent. It's really good.
It is good.
And so someone pulled that out of their ass and did a bang-up job of it. So I'm glad to hear that, too, because I would love to go see that.
Not even just the music, dude, but, like, you know, you're using your own imagination regardless when reading a book.
Yes.
Like, the set designs, all that stuff, like... Someone had to craft that. Someone had to craft that idea up, almost like being an Imagineer, like of Disney and whatnot. You know what I mean? So it really was incredible, dude. I was astounded. I still am. It's still one of my favorite plays. That's why it is my number 2 for sure. And now they're making a movie with it with Ariana Grande as the Good Witch.
Okay.
As the Good Witch.
Right.
So I think that's great casting. I forgot who's playing the Wicked Witch, but I'll have to find out afterwards. I want to let you know who it is. I think you would be intrigued with it too. So all right. So you didn't read the book, and you only saw parts of the play.
Yes. So we did. I can't remember the name of the song, but we did one of the songs in choir freshman year, and it was a blast. And it was like, oh, okay, Wicked. Because I had, like, my context was, all right, this is like Wizard of Oz prequel.
Right.
I was not, Wizard of Oz, I liked it, but I was not, like, a major fan. So it wasn't really on my radar. And then the music changed my mind, and I heard other tunes since, and they're great. And I'm remiss. I really need to go see the show at some point.
I think that's also another one of those Broadway plays where, like, everyone's heard of it as well. Like, for a general audience.
It's been around a very long time as well. But somehow that doesn't strike me the same way as The Lion King and
Without
more
a
so
doubt.
as Phantom of the Opera. Wicked does not feel like it's overstayed its welcome yet. There's still very high demand, and it still somehow feels pretty fresh.
Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So that's impressive in and of itself. No matter how good or bad the show is, the fact that... I mean, think of it this way. How long does a movie run in the theater? A month?
A month to like a month and a half,
6
I would say,
weeks,
something like that. Yeah.
Then gone.
Yeah,
no matter how good it did. Like, Interstellar's a big movie. It's still left after its 6 to 8 week run.
Yes.
It's gone.
Right.
But Wicked still occupies the same theater it did 10, 15, I don't know, maybe 20. I don't think it's 20.
Possibly, but who knows?
But yeah, the fact that, like, there are people who are alive today who have never experienced Broadway to exclude Wicked, that's pretty wild to me. Like, that's not an insignificant number of people who have lived in this world of Wicked that exists. And same with Lion King, same with Phantom, but that still feels really fresh to me, even though I've never seen it. I really don't. I'm talking out of my ass here.
No, but I agree with you. You're onto something with that. You're onto something with it.
Take your word for it.
All right, we can move on to your number 2.
Right, my number 2 is really the way I'm doing the end of the list, top of the list, I should say. It's really, this is my number 1 classic, and then number 1 is my true number 1. I adore this show.
Yeah.
It will be timeless, I guarantee it. So my number 2, and maybe I'm a little biased because I was in it, and I had a great time doing it, was Guys and Dolls.
Really?
Guys and Dolls is perhaps, to me, the very definition of a Broadway musical, because it has a little bit of everything, and I think it really dips its toes in the water of so many different, because there's good amount of dancing, there's a great amount of music. There really have to be strong actors because there is a lot of dialogue. It's a period piece. It takes place in a gangster era of roughly the late 30s to the early 50s. It's never really explained what it should be.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people have taken different interpretations of when it can be, and that's a good thing.
It's a beautiful thing.
While Guys and Dolls is very clearly first half of the 20th century, I think it's so good that you can remove that entirely. You can remove that from chronology, put it some other time of the world, and it still works really well, and there's not a ton you have to change. There's romance, and there's love, and there's loss, and there's comedy, and there's drama. It just checks all the boxes. It is an excellent show. It is well thought out. It is well written. It is robust. It's so hard for me to fault it. At no point while I was involved in the production did I ever think, ooh, this didn't age well, or oh, that doesn't make as much sense, or that's no longer funny for a modern audience.
Right.
It's timeless. It is completely removed from its little corner of history, and you could plop it down anywhere in front of any audience, and it works, and it's great.
Okay.
It's important. Like, that's why West Side Story makes the list, because it's important.
Right.
I enjoy it. It's a great show, and I had a blast doing it, but it is equally, from an historical, logical perspective, it's an important show. I don't know how many times it's been on Broadway. It's at least 2 or 3. At least. And so for any show to come back, and to come back more than once, there's a high demand for it, and it has high value, and it has high returns.
Without a doubt.
I don't think there's a higher praise for a show than that demand and that satisfaction upon leaving the theater.
Without a doubt. I agree with you on that.
So it deserves to be number 1, but if we're not talking about strict classics, it's got to be number 2 behind my number 1 pick.
Okay. I think you should go ahead and say that number 1 right now.
Yeah, I'm going to drop it?
Yeah.
Right. So, along the lines of Young Frankenstein, my number 1 is The Producers.
I've never even heard of that.
Okay, so you want to talk about important.
Yeah.
Not only is this the first Mel Brooks movie, it's the first Mel Brooks musical, and then it became a movie again.
The Producers.
So here's your basic plot.
Yeah.
Max Bialystock is a failed director and playwright. He writes shit. He directs shit. He's not good at his job anymore. He's lost his touch. The way he makes money is by having sex with little old ladies who back his shows.
Oh.
And the guy who does his books, Leo Bloom, is a very meek accountant, has really nothing going for him, and, just clocks in, clocks out, is a number on a page. He's a statistic. These two meet, and he's accountant for Max Bialystock, and somehow Leo discovers that you can make more money from a flop musical than you can with a hit. All you gotta do is cook the books. Because if you make a ton of money, if it's a smashing success, they want their taxes. They want their cut.
Right.
If it's a flop, they assume that there was no money in the show. There's no proceeds. There's no profit. There's no tax money. So they set out to make the worst musical ever written. That's the show. And what happens is, in the first movie, the way the show plays out is vastly different than the way the musical plays out in the new movie and the musical. But long story short, no matter which one you see, you should see them both, because stunner casts in both of them. We can go over the people as well. It ends up being an accidental smash. And so now they are in deep shit because there is no, they were going to steal the money. They were going to run away to Brazil with the money.
Now they got all eyes.
And so the first movie basically just ends with them in ruins, Whereas the second movie and musical ends with them writing musicals from prison, and then they kind of have their comeuppance and a happy ending. It's funny, it's good. But so here's your cast. In the original, you have Gene Wilder as Leo Bloom, and you have Zero Mostel as Max Bialystock, who was a legend in his own right until he got blackballed for being a alleged communist during the Red Scare.
Whoa, really?
Was not a communist, as far as I know. Maybe had more socialist tendencies.
Sure.
He got blackballed, who was never on stage or on film ever again. I had seen, when I was briefly in forensics in sophomore year, speech and debate, someone did a piece called 0 Hour. And it's like the time between Zero's last performance and the moment at which he finds out he's blackballed, and he's just like, you watch him spiral out of control because he realizes his professional career is effectively over despite being as good as he was. His claim to fame was a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, but he was excellent in the producers. Flip side, in the musical and the movie, Leo Bloom is now played by Matthew Broderick.
Oh, okay.
And Max Bialystock is played by Nathan Lane. Here's your trivia. The two of them were on the Lion King soundtrack together. Nathan Lane was Timon, and Matthew Broderick did backup vocals.
Oh, really?
So they had met. They may have met before, but they met in '94, and then didn't work together, as far as I know, until '03 when the producer's musical came out. Now, I don't know the rest of the cast in the musical, but in the movie, you have a lot more people who you may know. Roger Bart, who played Frederick von Frankenstein in Young Frankenstein, played Carmen Gia, who was in a hilarious, like the sassiest of gay men. So funny. Hilarious. Like, steals the show. That whole sequence where they're getting, finding the worst director.
Yeah.
Roger Elizabeth Debris. He steals the he's so funny. And the playwright is a Nazi played by Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell, yeah.
Will Ferrell.
No way.
He's a pretty decent singer too. Like, he's not.
He is.
He's not like over the top.
Yeah,
like,
right.
He absolutely can carry a tune, whatever.
Yep.
And then of course, Ulla Inga Hansen, Benson Janssen, Tolan Small, and I'm probably forgetting a few names. Originally, the secretary, who becomes a little more important in the musical, is played by Uma Thurman. So it's a superstar cast.
I need to check that movie out. I need to check it out. I'm surprised that's not even ringing a bell for me when you first said it.
Because it came out so long ago. It was 05.
Yeah.
So
I gotta check it out.
The only time I've ever seen it in person was at the Count Basie in Red Bank.
Oh, really?
So that was for Greg's birthday. I was like, producers is here. We're going to go see the producers, and you didn't have to tell me twice.
Yeah.
So I had seen the movie. I've never seen the musical, but I've seen plenty of clips of it from online to compare it.
Yeah.
And I saw the musical off Broadway here in New Jersey. And I think someone's cousin was in it. Like a small part. He was one of the prisoners in Alcatraz. But I was like, oh, I know that guy. So that was kind of cool. Because this follows the same format as Young Frankenstein. All of the added music works, makes sense, and is important. It progresses the plot. There's a little bit of music in the original.
Yeah.
A little bit. Springtime for Hitler makes an appearance again. Because the show is Springtime for Hitler. And so that's like the main theme in both of the musicals. But there's more music in the musical version of the musical.
Yeah.
And there's more music elsewhere. And it's all good. Interestingly, the music doesn't speak to me quite as much as Young Frankenstein. But it is more deliberate, and it was the first shot. So it's all of Mel Brooks's best ideas are present.
Gotcha.
And so I appreciate that from trying to be objective about it and not skew my own, like, oh, well, the producers is significant to me because I watched it when I was a kid and I enjoyed it. Objectively, it scratches a lot of the same itches that Guys and Dolls does because there is so much there. A little less drama and a little more comedy, but there is so much there that there's something for everyone. It's an absolute potpourri of a show. So it has, to me, unless and until I see something better.
Right.
It has to be number one because as a big Mel Brooks fan and as a big fan of, I think, the Gesamtkunstwerk of every bit and piece coming together, all of the puzzle pieces fitting together the right way, that hits the nail on the head. That is sublime.
Beautiful, man. You vouched very heavy for this that I have to check this out in like the next week or so.
Well, at the very least, go. I'm sure you can find the movie on Netflix.
Oh, yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
And it's another thing we talked about accessibility more than once. That's the most accessible of them all because it exists in movie form. Like I could go watch Chicago, and that's great, and it's good that that's accessible. But that movie doesn't hit me the same way the musical does because the movie is fully fleshed out. There's a whole city there.
Right.
Except for when she's on trial where they do more of effect stuff, which is really neat. There's a full city. In the musical, you have the risers and you have the ladders. So everything else is left to your imagination.
Right.
So that, to me, musical movie, that doesn't scratch the same itch as the producers because the producers' movie, I would argue it is a hair better than the musical because there's a fully fleshed out city.
Right.
The producer's musical doesn't try to do minimalist. That's not the point. And while the sets are beautiful and the dancing, whatever, is beautiful, I think the movie, the plot functions better as a movie than it does in the musical form. And that is a major nitpick. Like that is, I'm struggling to have things to say that are wrong with the show. That's how good it is.
That's amazing.
So you got to go watch that because it's here and now. You could go pop some popcorn and sit down on your couch.
Okay,
You don't have to drive to Manhattan or anything.
Right.
Without question, that was a big one for me, and it still is a big one for me. That has to be number one. I have no choice, and I'm not mad about it. It's just the way things are. Just the pieces fall into place.
Beautiful. Alrighty. Now
I gotta know.
My number one. So it's Hamilton. Now let me tell you something about this, because I don't know if you would consider this cheating. Never saw it live.
How'd you see it?
The whole, I think it was like a 3 or 4 hour play of it. I think it felt
YouTube?
long. No. Disney Plus.
That counts.
That counts?
I mean, that's a little more movie, but it was recorded on stage. So I'll give you that.
Yes.
You've seen it.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't get the full effect, but you've seen it.
Right.
Absolutely, that passes.
Okay, awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Because, dude, I thought it was incredible. I thought the music. And it's the music that really puts it in that number one spot for me. The rapping. I thought it was so different for a Broadway show that it was, rapping's been around for a while now, but it was so innovative for Broadway, I thought, how it's never been done. Now...
It has.
But has it?
But it was also Lin-Manuel Miranda. So I'll let you finish.
Okay.
I'll let you Technically, it's been done, but by the same guy, so it had never been done before.
Oh, okay.
Still
Gotcha.
counts. Still counts.
Oh, I'm curious to know what else he did before that. Okay.
I have very mixed emotions about Hamilton. So I want to hear.
Okay.
I want to hear what you have to say about it because I have not seen it to completion. But I've heard the soundtrack. I've listened to the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And that actually may have been a bad thing because, again, I'm a classically trained musician. I'm going to analyze the shit out of it.
Right.
That's what I do. I can't help it.
Right.
So I'm interested in your perspective on it because you've seen it.
Yeah.
And you're not a classically trained musician.
Right.
You just like some Broadway.
Yeah.
Every once in a while. So the rapping, unique.
Rapping, unique. The music doesn't stop. There is no talking pieces, except for maybe the very beginning. But otherwise, the music does not stop. After the first song, it goes into the next, and I think it all blends perfectly. That was another interesting about this play that I really don't see in other ones that it did. Alexander Hamilton, I'm also not a history guy. No, I had no idea what the guy did for America and everything like that of that nature. Pretty important dude. Very important dude. He did a lot. He was a fighter, and everything like that. So it was great. I almost related to the epic rap battles of history. Dude, throwback, right? I almost related back to them because I learned something about history.
Yes.
And I enjoyed the hell out of it with its music.
Can't do any worse than that.
Enough said with that, right? And then, what's his name again?
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah. I think he is a creative genius. I thought it was... I think he's fantastic.
Unquestionably. Dude. No matter how you feel about anything that's going on there, he just knows his shit.
Yes.
He absolutely, positively, unequivocally knows what the hell he's talking about and then executes it to perfection. Absolutely. Whether or not you agree with it, objectively you have to concede, man's got it going on.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
Got it going on.
I will say he did make the music, and he might have been a producer for that one movie, In the Heights or Into the Heights.
Well, that's the other show.
So that came out first before Hamilton?
That was his first musical.
Really?
So there's some rapping in there, but it's like there's a couple characters who do it. And also, because you mentioned the music the whole time, that gets down into two musical ideas. One being opera. Yeah. There is no speaking. But also, this more so counts for movies, but it can exist. Oh, I got a hair.
Well...
like that. So this also counts for musicals, but more so you hear it in movies, called through composition. The way this works is there are not monolithic, here's a song, here's a song, here's a song. In through composition, from beginning to end, and you believe it or not, this is easiest to hear in old cartoons. Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry in particular. From beginning to end, all of the music is composed and written and performed for what you're seeing.
Okay.
So the less important moments might have just some incidental, some strings doing some boring shit, and that's fine because you don't want to distract.
Right.
But for more dramatic and for the musical numbers, everything ramps up. And so the whole time you've got music. Now, the reason why Hamilton really strays more toward opera is because there is no speaking. You can absolutely talk for through composition, and there's plenty of it. Old movies are guilty as sin. The 1930s are full of movies that have through composition, and everyone's talking over the music. Hamilton doesn't do that, according to you, and I have no reason not to trust you on that. So that really, it's basically... Lin-Manuel Miranda did everything in his power not to write an opera in the format of an opera.
It's so interesting that you bring it up that way because I can't stand... and I'm not bashing against it. I understand why it's popular in some instances. Can't stand opera.
Your opinion is not uncommon.
Yeah. And how I know that? Through Phantom of the Opera. That's how I know it. And I'll tell you what. And I love Hamilton. That's the ironic part of it all.
So, I'll talk briefly about In the Heights because I was in the pit for that show, and God, for your viewers, for the benefit of your viewers, In the Heights takes place in a very similar neighborhood that West Side Story might.
Right.
Your whole cast is Latino.
Right.
The problem with the show I was in was it was in the middle of Pennsylvania. And the cast was all white.
Really?
And they were not good at the accents. And it was kind of a rich kid's school, still a public school, but it was kind of a rich kid's school. Like, they hired people to build the sets, and they hired all of us to play the music. Whereas at Township, the students played the music.
Right.
So a lot of money.
Yeah.
And not a great deal of talent. There were a handful of real standouts, like, oh, wow, she's really good. Well, this he knows what he's doing. So I'm a bit jaded, I'm a bit biased, but in general, the show is pretty damn good. There are a couple numbers that are just awesome. Like the Powerless and the Lights Out, like that's a really cool, again, using the light and sound to your advantage. I don't think there's enough darkness, if that makes sense. There's not enough darkness. There's a lot of flash, and there's a lot of color, and there's a lot of frou-frou, and you need to use every tool at your disposal every single time if you really want to wow anybody. And honestly, I think that's a bad thing. I think that's unfortunate, but that's where we are. That is the climate.
Right.
Everyone wants over the top, so give it to them. And so that scene in and of itself, that's got to be my favorite scene. And that ends the act, too. So the power is cut, and then we're left on a cliffhanger. So also, you use the dramatic break of the intermission to your advantage as a plot device.
Yeah.
So, in the Heights, I don't love the rapping. I'm not into rap because I feel like rap is a missed opportunity. Here's your music. Here are your basics. You have the melody.
Right.
You have the rhythm. And you have the beat. The reason rhythm and beat are split is... And in melody, you also have harmony. I'm not going to split that into different categories. Reason rhythm and beat are two different categories is because rhythm are the individual note lengths. What is the rhythm of the song? How do I identify this song? The beat is the more overarching topic of, is this in 2? Is this in 3? Is this something else? Like you have Mission Impossible's in 5.
How does that thing? Yes, that's right. That's right.
So that's beat. That's not rhythm. So my issue with a lot of rap is oftentimes there is no melody. So you've just kneecapped a third of your creative power.
Okay.
You have now removed your ability to tell a more convincing story, a more interesting story, by not having a melody. I would rather have that than have someone auto-tuned. Because then you're not trying.
Without a doubt. 110%.
If you're going to auto-tune, you must crank it up to 11 because that's the sound you want. Like Daft Punk, for example.
Right.
Is heavily computerized.
Right.
And I'm okay with that, and I enjoy it because it's intentional. It's deliberate. This is what we want.
Yep.
Auto-tune for the sake of I can't sing.
Can't stand it.
Is, to me, you're no longer an artist. You're
an audio engineer at that point?
You hired a technician to do your job for you.
Right.
And so, I think I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, and I don't care because this is my educated opinion.
Yeah.
There is good rap out there, and I tend to find that it is mostly older rap, in part because of the recording technology. And this reference is auto-tune, but it's not exclusively auto-tune.
Right.
So, creating a beat was more difficult. You had to actually record something and then layer it, sample it, speed it up, slow it down. They did not have the technology that we have at our fingertips to do the same thing. I can achieve a handful of these same effects with just my phone, without any specialty software. Not all of them, but a handful of these effects I can achieve with just the phone in my pocket. That's a bad thing.
Yes, it is.
I think music should be accessible to everyone, and I'm glad everyone's trying their hand. But they got to try a little harder.
Agreed.
So, this brings me back around to Hamilton. There is a great story to be told here.
Yeah.
Even though Alexander Hamilton's not my favorite founding father, I am a history buff, and it is interesting. And there is an excellent story to be told. To not use, like I said, to not use all of the tools in your toolbox to tell that story is a disservice. And that's why my favorite song from Hamilton is You'll Be Back. Because A, it's a song.
Love that song,
and B, it's a showstopper. I like that. I like bad piano playing. I like pounding keys. Here's another bit of trivia. Here's your fun fact. Actually, I'll do you one better. I'll ask you the question. You give me the answer.
Okay.
What instrument family is the piano in? I'll help you out.
String.
So most people would say string because there are strings inside the piano.
That's not why I'm saying it, though. I'm saying it more because it's almost like people say that if you could play guitar, you could easily pick up piano or the other way around. Well, it's one of those two.
That's not necessarily untrue. But the way we categorize instruments is based on how they create their sound, which is the reason why a saxophone is not a brass instrument. It's made of brass, but it uses a wooden reed, and therefore is a woodwind.
Okay.
Piano has strings, but it is not a stringed instrument because when you press the key, hammers strike the strings. Correct. Piano is a percussion instrument.
Ah.
So rather than shy away from that and try to make piano beautiful when it certainly can be.
Yeah.
When now we're getting really deep into it. All the keys on the piano are very slightly out of tune, so that none of them are grossly out of tune. This is called equal temperament. Our Western ears are very happy to listen to this and be content. But when you play wind instruments or stringed instruments, where you can actually get the proper, correct, perfectly in tune note, they are more in tune, and they, in my opinion, can be more beautiful. Particularly strings and trombone, because we don't have buttons to push. You push a button and you're not quite in tune, you've got to bend the pitch to get it to work. For a string or a trombone, with a couple exceptions, the far extremes, all the way in, all the way out, or for strings, all the way up, all the way down, you can very gently move to the perfectly in tune note. We don't have the restrictions that most other instruments have. And so piano, again, is actually a very poor example of playing in tune, because once you tune the piano, all the keys are very slightly out.
Interesting.
So rather than try to make piano sweet and beautiful, pound on that shit. That's a percussion instrument. Wail on that. So that's why I enjoy that song so much, because not only is the lyrics are good and the singing is incredible, but what's underneath? Hammering piano. Hammering, wailing, going to town. I'm into that shit.
Hell yeah.
So Hamilton is a great show, objectively. There is so much good happening there.
Yeah.
So much good. And yet it leaves me with something to be desired. Because every single rap song, while that's the chosen art form, and there's nothing wrong with that, to me, you left something on the table. You didn't play for all the marbles.
Gotcha. And I could totally understand where you're coming from, being the music genius that you are.
Old school, man. I want things to be beautiful even when they're aggressive, and that's why I like ska so much. Because even though the lyrics can be super quick and very aggressively sung and played, it's all still tune. There's all still melody and harmony. There's no rap, at least not that I'm aware of. For most ska groups, ska punk, reggaeton, whatever offshoots you want to, categorize, there aren't a lot that I can think of that include any rap, because they're trying to create this sound. And that sound is beautiful music with extreme aggression. It's very fast, it's very loud, it's very punctuated. Love it.
Interesting.
So it doesn't have to be sweet and melodic, and it can be really to the walls. But I still want notes. Rhythm and beat are not enough for me, and that's why I think those moments in The Heights and most of Hamilton is lost on me. It's a shame, because it is high art. It is truly art.
Yeah,
it's just not my cup of tea.
That's perfectly fine, man. Listen, you went in depth with explaining that, and I appreciate that very much.
I can bullshit about a lot of topics. These topics in particular, this is my area of expertise.
Passion about.
Passion and profession.
Profession.
I got paid for a little while to do some music.
Yes, right.
So it makes sense why it's of those 5.5 musicals. I know Spider-Man really doesn't count. Those 5.5 musicals that you listed, it makes sense why it's the top, because you want to talk about groundbreaking, you want to talk about important. People can be talking about that for a long ass time, and you're going to see emulation of that type of show hereafter.
Oh,
you're
absolutely.
You're going to see copycats and people trying to chase down that sound.
Yeah, I kind of hope for it, but at the same time not hope for it, because I don't want it to lose that authenticity of it, man. We'll end it with this one question right here. It could be one that I mentioned or a different one. What would you want to be the next Broadway play you see?
That I see.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great question. So, because I've already seen it, this will be like my runner-up, like my knee-jerk reaction. I don't really think this is my answer. I would love to see the producers properly on Broadway.
Okay.
Because the Basie's nice, but it's the Basie. It's a small theater and limited sets, and they're amateurs. They're like semi-professionals, if you will. Certainly better than me, but not Broadway caliber. Well, I suppose because you mentioned The Lion King, I think I had the most visceral reaction to that, and I think out of principle I need to follow that thought.
Okay.
Because it's my favorite Disney movie. It's still running. It's still really good, and I live too damn close to Manhattan not to capitalize on that experience.
Sure.
Like, realistically, what would I wait for? What musical would have to come down the pike for me to say, oh, I heard Whispers on the Wind, and I won't go to Broadway until this shows up? I can't think of one.
Okay.
There's not a classic or contemporary show that really speaks to me. Now, that's talking musicals.
Okay.
If we're talking plays, I would love to see, I wish I could remember the name, but it was written by Benjamin Britten. And it takes place, the set design is what really sells this show. It takes place in 3 apartments all at once, but they're stacked. So the bottom apartment, you only see heads. The top apartment, you only see feet. And the middle apartment, you see everything. And it's the interaction between these 3
floors,
groups,
right?
Interacting amongst themselves as units, and interacting between themselves as a block, as like a mini community. Because really, in our apartment, certainly more so back then than now, an apartment is its own microcosm within the greater community. And so you have the interactions interpersonally and extrapersonally be outside your unit. And that, to me, is a fascinating idea. I have never heard of staging or scripting anything like that.
No, me
so
neither.
You want to talk musical? I think I'm going to go with Lion King because it's here and now, and I really got to go see it.
Yeah.
If we're talking play, because I know, again, everything we talked about today more or less was a musical.
True.
A play, I'm going to go with Benjamin Britten because that is, you want to talk about unique. Holy shit.
Sounds very unique.
I wish I'd thought of it. It's just
For sure.
That's so radical, so out in left field that, I think you would need to seriously consider where you're even having it so that you could make it properly. You would need to have, again, this massive 3-story building, basically, halfway sunken into the stage.
Right.
How do you pull this off?
Yeah.
So I play, no questions asked. I think that's what I want to see. But it's not like, Benjamin Britten is not like really in the mainstream. Most people would not know who that is.
I haven't heard either. Yeah.
So
okay.
I think I need to go see The Lion King. Long story short,
I only got one for you. The Book of Mormon.
Oh yeah, man, that is a great choice.
Dude, I love the South Park guys. First off, and I just hear it's hilarious. That's all I know about it.
Yeah,
that's all I know about it. And
apparently, it also has pretty decent music. Like, the music is not ham-fisted and thrown together. Yeah. Now, I don't know if it commits the sin of, like I said before, like having music to be a musical.
Yeah.
But it's not like there was a Book of Mormon movie or play and then they added music.
Right.
It's all fresh and new.
Right.
So you would have to think the guys are so creative anyway.
Yeah.
I can't think that if the medium they choose is a musical, that the music's going to be an afterthought. So that is a great choice, Frank.
Yeah, I really want to see that bad.
That's a good one.
Thanks, man.
So I would think, actually, that may be playing somewhere else in the United States. I would have to.
Really?
I have to assume, because
it's not at New York Broadway.
I don't
really.
Think I don't think so. You could look it up.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
That's one that, like, rather than lasting in one place for a really long time, I guess the requirements aren't as stringent, and so they can travel around.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if it's the same cast traveling around, but I think that one, it certainly did. I don't know if it still does, but that one made its rounds. That one's been everywhere.
Yeah, I know it's made its rounds around the block a couple times and whatnot.
For sure.
But all right, man, Dan, I want to thank you so much for joining the pod.
It's been my pleasure.
You have been completely insightful on so many different things, Broadway, even movies, and obviously the music. Fantastic, man. I really appreciate you being on the pod.
Thanks for having me on. This is my I officially popped my podcast cherry.
There you go.
I'm really not like a podcast listener generally, and I start to see these in my feed. I'm like, yeah, I could probably do that.
Hell yeah, man. You did great.
So, wish you a lot of luck with the pod. Obviously,
Thank you, dude.
Massively successful already, and
Thanks,
much
man.
more success to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. For you guys, if you enjoyed this episode at home, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Also follow us on all social media platforms at Frank_videos. And listen, if you want to listen to this audio-only version, you now can on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. So check us out there as well. With all that being said, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And peace out.
I'll deal with you as long as it takes. I had one client, they became good friends of mine. Now, we looked for probably 15 months till we closed on their house.
Wow.
For a majority of different reasons, but
Sure.
I don't give up, right?
Yeah,
I'm in
yeah.
it for the person, for the relationship, for you. I'm here to do a job. When my job is over, I'll go home. If you didn't get a house, I'm not going home. Now I'm a realtor, right? I'm doing it full time now.
Yeah.
Well, now I eat, sleep, breathe this.
Yeah.
Looking for property, calling owners, stalking the MLS. This is what I do. Mm-hmm. Now it becomes very easy to find investments. This is my job.
Right.
So ironically, selfishly, I get to cherry pick a deal I want.
Yeah.
Or look for myself while I'm looking. Oh, Frank wants to buy a house. Okay, cool. Well, while I'm looking for Frank, all of a sudden, oh, this is a good investment. So Frank might not really want it, but hey, I'm going to put this on the side and I'm going to underwrite this and look to see if this makes sense to pursue.